I just move shit with my freaking mind! Yeah, okay, that is something I do now. I do magic, talk to sentient cuffs, kill jacked up beasts. You know what? I'll probably fly next.
Now you're just being ridiculous.
Forspoken is annoyingly good. Forspoken is a third-person action game with free-running movement, magical combat systems, including melee and ranged and a lot of utility abilities. The game was developed by Luminous Productions and published by Square Enix. Luminous Productions is the same team that did Final Fantasy XV. Forspoken is a game that has so many good ideas and succeeds in so many ways, but always seems to just come short of being really good. When we get into all of the details of the game, you'll understand what I mean when I call this game annoyingly good. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, consider dropping a like and a subscription on my channel, especially if you like this kind of content. It really helps out, and we're almost at 3,000 subscribers already, which is amazing. My copy of the game was provided to me for free by Square Enix, so thank you very much for that. But all of my opinions in this video here are my own. The basic premise of Forspoken is very simple. It follows all of the tropes of an isekai anime. For those of you who don't know what that is, an isekai is a story where someone falls into a new world. Someone who generally speaking, keeps their modern consciousness and gets to basically be reborn in a fantasy world, usually where there are magic. It's generally speaking just kind of a power fantasy type story where you get to live your current life, but if you had magical powers in a fantasy setting or something fun like that. I have to confess that myself, I'm pretty, I've got a weak spot for isekai, so I was actually pretty excited when I heard that this was going to be that kind of game. This game features kind of all of the tropes as well. We see Truck-kun, we see references to Alice in Wonderland consistently throughout the game. It's very clearly and quite on the nose an isekai adventure. Forspoken's visuals are a bit strange to me. The characters look like they're from last gen, and the enemies and environments and special effects look like they are from next gen. So this kind of leaves me in this weird middle ground where I'm not sure whether to be impressed or disappointed in the way that the game looks. The animations of the characters, especially NPCs, come off looking very bricky and very poorly animated, but the enemies and the enemy design look incredible. Right from the beginning of the game, even fighting the most mundane monsters, I thought to myself, wow, these are really interesting, visually engaging monsters and environments. Once you get your free running ability, you have this really awesome looking trail that follows behind you that emphasizes the interesting movement that you're doing across the ground. At this point, we're already seeing things be kind of at odds with one another within Forspoken. There's this sort of gritty realism to a lot of the graphics, but then the characters in their simplicity end up looking more cartoonish or even anime in the way that they are animated. Forspoken seems to be trying to hit this middle ground between gritty next-gen realism and simplified anime aesthetics. And this tension really doesn't seem to work out. This is worth noting that a lot of the PC players have noted significant performance issues on PC. All of the footage that you're watching is on PlayStation 5, so I can only report what I've experienced. But if Steam reviews are to be believed, the performance issues are significantly bad on PC, and it's just better to avoid until they actually patch it. The game tries to do a lot of interesting stuff visually with their menus, adding this sort of warped effect to the edges of these menus. While I appreciate this effect and I appreciate a different stylistic move, this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me and doesn't feel very connected to the overall theming of the game. It feels like just sort of a stylistic choice for the sake of doing it rather than as an integrated part of the system. The game, at the end of the day, ends up feeling like a particle physics demonstration more than anything, as none of the other elements of the game feel particularly noteworthy. The one thing that I will camp on is that there are a lot of very memorable enemies in this game, particularly the dragon that you fight at the beginning, and a lot of the sort of elite enemies that you fight, like this awesome enemy. I love this enemy. Look how cool that is. However, this is unfortunately not even universal across the entire game, because look at this guy, like Blob Man, the enemy. What are you doing? Like, what are these two things doing in the same game? Is this the most creative, like, rock monster we could come up with? If there was a better art direction connecting all of these disparate parts of the game, I feel like I could rate this higher, but I can't possibly give it higher than a 7. And the 7 really just comes from a lot of these particular enemy designs that I really enjoyed, and the really cool particle effects. Unfortunately, I really don't have a lot to say when it comes to the sound design of Forspoken. It feels pretty generically well done. It's nothing really to write home about. Something that I did notice is that it seems like there was a lot of reused sound assets between this and Final Fantasy 15, and certain of those sound effects feel very out of place. I'm not sure whether this is because I feel more familiar with FF15, so I'm noticing them a lot. There's just nothing really original about the sound design to talk about. So for me, just a basic industry standard sound design gets a 6. There's nothing really notable, special, or exciting about the way that it's designed. I will hold off here on talking about voice acting because we will get to that in the story portion.
How did you sneak past the guards? I prepared a tincture of slumber baked into a pastry.
Forspoken is a typical action RPG, which means you run around the world, you beat up stuff, you get experience. Experience gives you these points called mana. You spend mana on upgrading all of your abilities in various skill trees. And you also pick up mana as these little glowing motes of light on the ground as you adventure throughout the world. In the early parts of the game, I completed all of the side areas, got all of the collectibles. Unfortunately, almost everything to do with collectibles is useless. God, this is so disappointing. The upgrade tree is super useful, and when you get these pretty binary upgrades where you hit a next upgrade tree that costs almost double the first one, and you'll deal a significantly more damage or unlock a new ability. Those feel really great. The equipment, however, feels totally useless. Oh man. You get nail upgrades as well, which is very cool aesthetically, but really never progressed beyond that for me as far as I can tell. The need for it as well is pretty much zero. Like, I played this game on the hardest difficulty and it was just not hard. I did not need the buffs, and the buffs were also so minor that I found myself just not really needing them ever. I also ran when I first started the game as well. I was running around the map a lot, fighting lots of enemies, getting experience, but you get more experience just by running through the game at full tilt. You can just pick up mana on the ground and you'll have enough to almost completely upgrade every tree. And yeah, it doesn't present a problem at all even until the late game. So it has all these RPG elements, but they just don't feel that important at all. And an RPG with de-emphasized RPG elements feels, I don't know, just questionable to me. The crafting materials that you pick up in the world are also basically useless. The things that they're used for are to hold more of the other crafting materials and to hold more potions. And I barely used potions and almost never used the upgrade system because, again, the upgrade system, it just seems to be used to arbitrarily just upgrade the stats of your cloak and stuff. So I just would randomly dump all of my upgrade materials onto whatever current cloak I had. And again, I barely interacted with this system at all. I basically stopped caring about picking anything up at a certain point and just gave up on that entirely. So you start the game with Frey's purple magic, which is the sort of plant stone based magic, and mechanically speaking it's quite basic. It's all ranged attacks, and all of your special abilities are kind of crowd control. You can make a turret, you can make a mine, that kind of thing. Where the game really starts to find its feet is when you start getting these other schools of magic. Now you get these from completing bosses in the game. I'm not going to give any more details than that. And this is where the game mechanically really starts to actually take off. And what's so frustrating is you can go through so much of the game and do so much side content before you ever get your second school of magic, which is where the entire combat system really feels like it takes off. So it's very frustrating. Like, this is what I mean by it's annoying. Like, it's annoyingly good. When you start getting these second and third and fourth schools of magic, the system really comes alive and starts to actually have depth, like using these different schools together, combining their abilities, combining their tactics. But by the time you really get to take advantage of these things, the game is almost over. Like, the amount of time that the game takes in the first part of the game before you even get your second school of magic is so much longer than the rest of the game combined. So it feels like they were trying to pace out this combat system that could be complex, but it just ended up robbing the experience. Like, someone who comes into the game with just seeing the purple magic is like, oh, this is boring. Like, it's just ranged spam this whole time. And the second school of magic you get is this wicked melee like spell. And so you can be like shooting from range, dashing in close, throwing on a damage over time effect, dashing back out. It's awesome. Like, it really, really comes alive. And this is the point of the game that made me want to actually finish the game in its entirety. I can't really emphasize enough how much this game really is robbing itself in the way that it presents these elements of the game. I think that if this game led with the more complex side of this combat system, I think that would draw in a lot of people. Seeing all these like interesting ways that you can combine these different magical systems together, at least for me, was the point that actually drew me into the game. The progression of the game does not feel very rewarding. Doing side content really does not feel worth your time. If you're playing through this game and you're finding that it's becoming sloggy, just start progressing through the main storyline. They throw experience and consumables at you just through the main storyline. There's no real reason to do the side content. And since we're on the topic of how things are presented, there's no further place for us to go than to talk about the story, the presentation, and the quest structure. The English voice actors are not very good.
That is something I do now. I do magic, talk to sentient cuffs, kill jacked up beasts. You know what? I'll probably fly next.
Now you're just being ridiculous.
Oh, that's too far. Good to know there's a line.
If you could
I just move shit with my
master
mind.
those new abilities, with my help, of course.
Did you not just see me take out that gnarly beast? Oh!
Again, this game falls so firmly into this category of annoyingly good because the actual performances by the voice actors are good. They just lack an essential chemistry that would really make the dynamic fly. You can tell that in the writing, in the way that these lines are written, in the situations that they're given, you can tell that these are meant to be charming, endearing, banter back and forth between Frey and Cuff. I don't know. I'm really curious how they recorded their voice lines, because they really feel like they were two different people recording their voice lines in different rooms, and that they weren't like playing off of each other and doing like voice acting together with good dynamics. And that fundamental miss of that chemistry between Cuff and Frey undercuts all of the drama, all of the story, all of the tension in the game. To have a good discussion about Forspoken, we need to have a discussion of pacing. Pacing isn't just the rate at which things are presented to you, it's also about a cohesive tone that is achieved through pacing. Outside of story beats and cutscenes, the game is very fast-paced, very intense. The free-flowing movement allows for lots of fast travel between different places. It's very satisfying, very crunchy, and very stimulating. When the game gets down to doing side quests and story missions and cutscenes, all of that intensity and connectivity that you feel in the main game is so fundamentally lost. You can't use your movement abilities in the city to get from place to place. The quests are comically slow, like super slow escort quests, and this abomination of a side quest that I did where you have to go find sheep and feed them. Dear God. When doing the side content, I was reminded that this is designed as a time-wasting MMO right now. Where did this fast-paced action game that's moving from beat to beat go? And this is one of my deepest criticisms of Forspoken. The pacing is out the freaking window. Like, we go from these intense, fast-paced, like, excellent action sequences, and then we go into some of the most boring, nonsensical, poorly acted, poorly paced out side quests and story beats. It really feels like these two elements of the game were designed completely obliviously of each other. And I think I could have gotten over some of the lackluster story and writing if the tone and pacing felt cohesive. But this game is so slow when it's doing story beats and so fast and intense when it's doing action. It just feels like these are two different games. Just a quick note, this section will have story spoilers, so if you don't want that, you can just skip past this to get to the final review. Forspoken follows a very formulaic storyline. Main character is a disenfranchised youth. They find out that they are a magical chosen one. They go into a magical world. They discover they're powerful, and they discover that they're very special and that they need to save the world, and so then they do. And why stories like that are interesting is because of the transformation that occurs in the character. It's the hero's journey. The only reason that that's really interesting to an audience is we see generally unlikable or small-minded character develop, become open-minded, have a better understanding of their world, come to a sense of responsibility. Just general character growth. Frey struggles with a single element of character growth the entire game, and this continues to be a struggle right until the end of the game. The funny part is it's literally presented as a binary choice. You learn all of this story about how the Tantas are actually your aunties, and Tanta Cinta's actually your mom, and you're a goddess meant to save this world. And she continues to struggle with one basic character development issue, which is, do I care about other people, and am I willing to care about the consequences for others, not just for myself? Now, this alone could be an interesting theme if there was different developments and growth that happened along the way in the story, but it doesn't really happen. In fact, you can just choose in this setting to go back to New York, and then, yep, just nothing changed at all. Your character has had no transformation along the way. And it's this sort of binary, at the end of the story, decision to change one part of her character that just gives the whole story such a sour taste to me. Frey just kind of bulldozes her way through the entire experience, just barely at the end decides to care about the world. It's not because of her relationships with the people that she's built in the world. It's not because she's learned to trust despite the betrayal from Cuff. And I can understand that the story writers may have been trying to kind of stack up all of these reasons for her to care about the world, and then in the end she decides to do it. I would have just liked to see her care more about her own circumstances, her own relationships. Frey just remains so detached from everyone around her that it's really hard to believe that she would choose to fight for this world at the end of the game. In the end, Forspoken is a competent third-person action game with terrible side quests, repetitive and useless open world elements, a mediocre at best story, mediocre at best graphics, and poor English voice acting. Why I said that this game is annoyingly good is that the core, the combat of this game and the movement are so good. It feels wasted on this game. A game with a more competent story, better acting, better animation, and this would be a very, very good game. It has all of the essential parts that it needs to be a very, very good AAA game. As it exists now, I can't give this game anything higher than a 5 out of 10. Alright, thank you so much for watching my review. Thanks again to Square Enix for providing a review copy of the game. Genuinely appreciated. I am really excited to see what else comes out of Square Enix this year. Final Fantasy 16 is coming out fairly soon, so if you are looking forward to that or excited to see where that goes, definitely drop a sub on the channel, because I definitely will be doing a review of Final Fantasy 16 when it comes out.